Karoline Leavitt had been to Las Vegas many times before. She had seen the bright lights, the tall buildings, and the busy streets full of people. But today was different. She was not here to have fun. She was not here to play games in the casino. She was not here to talk to important business people. No, today was special. Karoline had come to check on her hotel, the Leavitt Resort. It was a huge, fancy hotel and she had built it herself. It was supposed to be the best hotel in Las Vegas. It had sparkling chandeliers, shiny marble floors, and a casino full of blinking lights and slot machines. People from all over the world came to stay at her hotel. But something was wrong. Karoline had heard that guests were unhappy. Some people said the staff was rude. Others complained about waiting too long to check in. Some guests even said the workers did not care about them at all. This made Karoline worried. She wanted to see the truth for herself. So today she was pretending to be an ordinary traveler. She put on an old gray t-shirt, faded jeans, and a worn-out travel hat. She carried a small, simple bag. She looked nothing like the rich and powerful CEO of Leavitt Resorts. Instead, she looked like someone who had been traveling for a long time and just needed a place to rest. When she got out of the taxi in front of the hotel, she looked up at the giant golden building. The sun made it shine so brightly. It was still as grand as she remembered. But fancy buildings were not enough. A hotel was only as good as the people who worked inside. Karoline walked inside. The lobby was huge and filled with people. Some guests wore fancy clothes and looked rich. Others were dressed casually, excited for their vacations. Some people were talking happily while others looked tired from traveling. But no one noticed Karoline. She walked up to the front desk. A young woman stood behind the counter, but she wasn't paying attention. She was staring at her phone, tapping on the screen. Karoline cleared her throat. "Excuse me," she said softly. The receptionist barely looked up. Her face looked bored. "Can I help you?" she asked in a flat voice. Karoline gave a small smile. "I'd like to check in. I'm just passing through." She placed her bag on the counter. The receptionist looked at Karoline's worn-out clothes. For a second, her nose wrinkled like she had smelled something bad. Then she said, "I don't think this hotel is for people like you. Maybe you should try a different place down the street." Karoline felt her heart tighten. She had worked so hard to build this hotel. And now one of her employees was treating a guest this way? But she didn't get angry. Not yet. She kept her voice calm. "I'm sure you can find a room for me," she said politely. "I'd just like to check in, please." The receptionist let out a loud sigh. She rolled her eyes and started typing on her computer. She did not smile. She did not welcome Karoline. She didn't even explain anything about the hotel. Finally, she pushed a key card across the counter. "Room 307, she said. "You're on your own." Karoline picked up the key. She gave the receptionist a small smile before walking away. "Thank you," she said. As she walked to the elevator, she felt a little fire burning inside her. She had never liked rude people. A hotel should treat every guest kindly, no matter who they were or what they looked like. She stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the top floor. The metal doors closed and she leaned against the wall, closing her eyes for a moment. She had to stay calm. This was all part of the plan. The elevator moved up smoothly. When it reached the top floor, the doors opened and Karoline stepped out. This part of the hotel was quieter. The carpet was soft and the walls were decorated with elegant paintings. Everything looked perfect. She walked slowly to her room. She ran her fingers along the smooth walls as she passed. When she opened the door, she saw that the room was simple, just as she had asked. She didn't need a fancy room. She wasn't here to relax. She was here to watch, to listen, to learn. She placed her bag down and took a deep breath. Then she decided to head back downstairs. Something big was happening tonight, the annual casino gala. The casino gala was a special event. It was the biggest party of the year. Important people from all over the world would be there. Business owners, movie stars, high rollers, and VIP guests would gather at the Leavitt Resort. Karoline had watched this event from behind the scenes every year. But tonight, things would be different. Tonight, she would not hide. She would let everyone know exactly who she was. As the evening arrived, the hotel transformed. The chandeliers glowed even brighter. The floors sparkled like they had been polished just minutes ago. The music played softly in the background, filling the air with excitement. The guests arrived, dressed in their finest suits and dresses. Everyone was ready for a night of luxury and fun. Karoline walked through the lobby again. This time she watched the staff carefully. She wanted to see how they treated other guests. She saw some workers smiling and helping people. That was good. But she also saw others acting like the receptionist from earlier, Cold, uninterested, and rude. That was bad. She made a mental note of every mistake, every careless action, every guest who looked disappointed. Then she made her way to the grand ballroom where the gala was being held. The room was stunning. Golden decorations hung from the ceiling. Tables were set with crystal glasses and fine silverware. A stage stood at the front, where speeches would be made later in the night. Karoline stayed in the background watching. Then, at just the right moment, she stepped forward. The music quieted. People turned to look at her. For a moment, they saw just an ordinary woman in simple clothes. But then someone gasped. "Wait a minute," a guest whispered. That's Karoline Leavitt." A hush fell over the crowd. The hotel staff turned pale, especially the receptionist. Karoline stepped onto the stage. She took off her worn-out travel hat and let her hair fall around her shoulders. She stood tall, her eyes scanning the room. Then she spoke. "Good evening, everyone," she said. Her voice was strong and clear. "I am Karoline Leavitt, the owner of this hotel." A ripple of whispers spread through the room. "I built this hotel because I believe in luxury," she continued. "But luxury is not just about gold and marble. It's about how we treat people. It's about kindness, respect, hospitality." She paused. "Tonight I checked into my own hotel," she said, "and I was treated terribly." The room was silent. Karoline turned her gaze toward the front desk, where the receptionist stood frozen in place. "A hotel is only as good as the people who work in it," Karoline said. "And if my staff does not respect our guests, then we have failed." She took a deep breath and smiled. "But I believe in second chances," she said. "Starting tomorrow, things will change. We will be better." Then she stepped down from the stage. The room erupted into applause. Some staff members looked relieved. Others looked nervous. And the receptionist? She had learned a very, very important lesson. Karoline had come to Las Vegas as a simple traveler. But now she was leaving as the powerful CEO she had always been. And the Leavitt Resort would never be the same again. Karoline's team worked very hard to make the big party perfect. They wanted everyone who came to have a great time and remember this special night. But while they were busy setting up everything, Karoline stayed hidden. She watched everything from the shadows, not letting anyone see her yet. At the entrance of the grand party hall, two huge golden statues stood tall. These statues showed how fancy and successful the hotel was. When the guests walked inside, they saw beautiful chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. The chandeliers had thousands of tiny sparkling crystals, and they made the whole room shine. Soft jazz music played in the background, and the air smelled like fresh roses and expensive perfume. Everything was perfect. The floor was so clean and shiny that it looked like a mirror. The people at the party were dressed in the most beautiful clothes. Men wore black tuxedos and women wore long, fancy dresses. They held glasses of sparkling champagne, talking and laughing with each other. The whole room felt grand and magical. Karoline stood in the shadows, watching everything. She looked at the happy faces, the handshakes, and the secret glances people gave each other. This was her world. She had built this hotel with her own hard work. But even though everything looked perfect on the outside, Karoline knew something was wrong. She could feel it. At first, the signs were small. The workers at the hotel who once loved their jobs now seemed tired and uninterested. The little details that made the hotel special were starting to fade. Earlier that day, a receptionist had been very rude to a guest. That was just one example of a much bigger problem. Karoline knew she had to do something. As the party went on, Karoline walked to the backstage area. Behind the curtains, dancers in colorful costumes were getting ready. Musicians were tuning their instruments. A grand performance was about to begin. The lights, the music, and the show would keep the guests entertained for hours. But Karoline had a different plan. The event had been carefully planned, with some surprises to make it exciting. But Karoline had her own surprise. No one knew what she was about to do, not even her staff. She wanted to remind everyone who was really in charge. The party was at its peak. Important people had already given their speeches, and now the guests were sitting down, waiting for the show to start. The lights dimmed and a bright spotlight shone on the stage. At that moment, Karoline stepped out of the shadows. She walked confidently toward the stage. Her high heels made a soft clicking sound on the shiny floor. Slowly, people started to notice her. Some recognized her face, but most did not. In the back of the room, the receptionist who had been rude earlier was still working at the bar. She was arranging drinks for a guest, not even looking up. Karoline could see the bored expression on the young woman's face. But soon that would change. Karoline climbed the steps to the stage, standing tall and proud. The crowd started whispering. They were confused. Who was this woman and why was she standing there? Karoline raised her hand and the room fell silent. Everyone waited to hear what she had to say. "Good evening, everyone," Karoline said. Her voice was calm but strong. It echoed through the grand hall. "I hope you are all enjoying the party. But I have something important to say." The guests stopped sipping their drinks. They leaned in, curious about this unexpected speech. Karoline's sharp eyes scanned the room. Then she saw the receptionist. The young woman had finally looked up from her work. When she saw Karoline, her eyes widened in shock. She recognized her now. Her face turned pale. "My name is Karoline Leavitt," she said clearly, her voice slow and firm. "I am the CEO of Leavitt Resorts." For a moment, the entire room was frozen. Silence filled the air. Some people gasped. Others exchanged confused looks. Was this real? The receptionist's face turned red. Her hands shook as she stepped back from the bar. She couldn't believe it. The woman she had ignored and treated badly was actually the owner of the entire hotel. Karoline could feel the weight of the moment. Every eye in the room was on her. This wasn't just about showing people who she was. It was about teaching a lesson. A lesson about respect. People had assumed she was just a simple traveler, someone who didn't belong in a fancy place like this. But they were wrong. Success wasn't just about wearing expensive clothes. It wasn't about looking rich. It was about hard work and treating people right. She stepped away from the microphone, letting her words sink in. She could see the receptionist struggling to stay calm. The young woman looked around as if trying to find a way to escape. But there was no escape. Karoline turned back to the crowd. "Tonight has been about luxury and beauty," she continued. "But it is also about something more important, how we treat one another. Every person in this hotel matters. Whether you are a guest staying in the best room or an employee cleaning the floors, your value is not measured by your title. It is measured by your kindness and your actions." The guests listened closely. No one dared to speak. Karoline's eyes went back to the receptionist. The young woman's cheeks were bright red now. She looked embarrassed, like she wanted to disappear. Karoline took a step closer, her voice soft but firm. "And now we must learn a lesson about humility," she said. "We must take responsibility for our actions." The receptionist opened her mouth as if to say something, but no words came out. Her hand shook. The people in the room started whispering again, talking about what had just happened. The realization hit them all at once. The receptionist had been rude to the most important person in the room without even knowing it. Karoline turned back to the crowd. "I hope you all take a moment to think about this," she said. "Respect is not just for the rich or the powerful. It is for everyone." Her voice was steady, but her message was strong. She wanted them to remember this moment forever. The receptionist was still frozen in place. Her eyes met Karoline's again, filled with fear. She knew her mistake had been big. Very big. The room stayed silent, the weight of Karoline's words hanging in the air. Then slowly the guests began to clap. The applause was quiet at first, unsure. But then it grew louder. People nodded in agreement. Some even looked guilty, realizing they too had judged others unfairly in the past. Karoline stood at the back of the stage, her face calm. She didn't need to stay in the spotlight any longer. Her point had been made. The receptionist still hadn't moved. She looked completely lost, her world turned upside down. Karoline had seen this happen before. Many times in her life, she had been treated unfairly just because of how she looked. People assumed she was not important. But tonight, she had shown them all that appearances could be deceiving. She had made sure the receptionist would never forget this lesson. Finally, Karoline spoke again, her voice softer now. "Let this be a reminder," she said. "In this hotel, every person matters. And respect must be given to all." The receptionist lowered her eyes, too ashamed to look at her. Karoline knew that after tonight, things would change. Not just for the receptionist, but for everyone in the room. She gave the crowd one last look, then turned and walked off the stage. The game had just begun, and the rules were about to change. Karoline stood still, her eyes sharp and serious. The woman in front of her, the receptionist, looked scared. She wanted to speak, to say something that could take back what had happened, but it was too late. She had already crossed the line, and now, everything was changing. Karoline took a deep breath, her voice calm but strong. "You were rude to me earlier today," she said. "You looked at me and decided that I didn't belong here. You thought that because of how I looked, I wasn't important. You didn't treat me with respect." The receptionist's face turned pale. She wanted to apologize, to say she was sorry, but no words came out. She knew Karoline was right. Karoline wasn't happy to see the fear in the woman's eyes. But she knew this moment had to happen. People needed to learn that being rude and judging others wasn't okay. "You can't work here anymore," Karoline said, her voice cold and final. "I won't let this kind of behavior continue in my hotel. Please pack your things and leave." The receptionist's eyes filled with panic. She looked around the room hoping someone would help her, but no one did. Deep down she knew she had been wrong. She had made a mistake and now she had to face the consequences. Karoline turned to the security guard standing by the entrance. He had been watching everything, waiting quietly. With a small nod, Karoline gave him an order. "Please escort her out," she said firmly. The security guard didn't argue. He walked up to the receptionist and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. She didn't fight back. She simply held onto the edge of the desk, her hands shaking, before following him toward the exit. Her head was down, her steps slow and unsteady. Karoline didn't watch her leave. Instead, she turned back to the crowd of people who had seen everything happen. Some whispered to each other, surprised by what had just taken place. Others just stood there, not knowing what to say. But Karoline knew that this moment was important. This wasn't just about one person losing their job. This was about changing the way people thought and acted in her hotel. The night continued as if nothing had happened. People laughed, talked, and danced. Music played and the party went on. But Karoline wasn't thinking about the party. Her mind was focused on what had just happened and what needed to happen next. She had made a statement. She had shown that disrespect would not be tolerated. And this was just the beginning. The next morning, the sun was shining over the Las Vegas desert. Light filled Karoline's luxurious hotel room. The bed was soft, the curtains were silky, and everything around her looked perfect. But something inside her felt different. She wasn't sad about what had happened last night. She didn't regret firing the receptionist. Instead, she felt even more determined. Karoline sipped her morning coffee, staring out the window. She knew that what had happened last night wasn't just about one employee being rude. It was about something much bigger. It was about changing the way people in her hotel treated each other. This hotel was her dream. She had worked hard to build it, to make it a place where guests felt special. But over time, something had changed. Some of her employees had started thinking they were better than others. They had forgotten that being kind and respectful was the most important thing. Karoline wasn't going to let that continue. She had made a big decision last night, but now it was time to take action. She needed to make sure that no one in her hotel would ever treat another person badly again. By mid-morning, Karoline had called a meeting with all the top managers in the hotel. The meeting was set for 10 a.m., and as the minutes passed, people started arriving. The managers were nervous. It wasn't normal for Karoline to call meetings like this, especially not so suddenly. They all sat down waiting for her to speak. Karoline looked around the room. She could see the worry on their faces. She knew they were expecting her to talk about the receptionist she had fired. But this wasn't just about one person. She took a deep breath and started speaking. "I called this meeting because something happened last night that we need to talk about," she said, her voice clear and serious. She didn't waste time. She got straight to the point. "The receptionist I fired last night wasn't the only problem," Karoline said. "What happened to her is just one small part of a much bigger issue." The room was silent. Everyone listened carefully. "For too long, some of our employees have been treating people badly," Karoline continued. "They have been acting as if they are better than others. They have been rude, disrespectful, and careless. And I won't allow it anymore." Some of the managers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had noticed small problems before, but none of them had thought it was a big deal. "We are in the hospitality business," Karoline said, her voice strong. "Do you know what that means? It means we take care of people. It means we make them feel special no matter who they are." She looked around the room, making sure everyone was listening. "This hotel is not just about fancy decorations or expensive rooms," she said. "It's about how we treat people. Whether someone is rich or poor, famous or unknown, they deserve respect." One of the managers, an older man, cleared his throat. He looked nervous but spoke anyway. "Karoline, I understand what you're saying," he said carefully. "But we've had problems like this before. There have always been a few bad employees. But does that really mean we need to change everything?" Karoline turned to him, her eyes serious. "Yes," she said simply. "Because this isn't just about a few bad employees. This is about our entire culture." Karoline stood up and walked around the room. "I have spent years building this hotel," she said, "and I will not let it turn into a place where people feel unwelcome." She took a deep breath before continuing. "From now on, things will change," she said. "Every single employee in this hotel will be trained on respect and kindness. If they don't follow our values, they won't work here anymore. The managers looked at each other, realizing how serious she was. I will not allow anyone to treat our guests or their co-workers badly, Karoline said. And if anyone thinks that kindness and respect don't matter, then they don't belong here. The room was quiet. Everyone knew this was a turning point. Karoline looked at each of them and smiled slightly. This is not just about business, she said. This is about who we are. She then walked to the door and turned back one last time. If you believe in this, stand with me, she said. If you don't, you're free to leave. And with that, she walked out, knowing that this was just the beginning of something bigger. Karoline's eyes became serious as she looked at the people in front of her. Her voice was strong. No, this is not too much. This is a wake-up call. This is the last time I will accept bad attitudes. If we want to keep our hotel as one of the best, we need to fix our problems. That starts with treating our workers and guests the right way. From the moment someone walks in until they leave, we must be respectful and kind. The room was very quiet. Everyone was thinking about her words. Karoline knew it would not be easy to change the way things had been for a long time. But she was ready. She had seen too many problems. For months, small complaints had been ignored. But now she knew they were not small. These were signs that the hotel's success was in danger. I am going to make sure every worker learns how to be kind and professional, Karoline said. Everyone, from the front desk workers to the cleaners, will have training. I will make new rules for how we treat each other and our guests. If you cannot follow these new rules, you will have to leave. No exceptions. The room was tense. Some people looked nervous. Others looked upset. Karoline did not know if they truly understood why this was important. But they would soon. This is not just about making the hotel better, she said, her voice softer but still strong. This is about making ourselves better people. If we want our hotel to grow and succeed, we must start by treating every worker and every guest with respect and kindness. If you cannot do that, then you should start looking for a new job. No one spoke. The room stayed silent. Karoline could feel how serious this moment was. She knew some people might not like the changes, but change was coming no matter what. For the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful. The training starts next week, Karoline said. Her voice was firm, but she smiled a little. I expect to see real change. This is not up for discussion. The meeting ended. People slowly left the room. Some looked unsure. Others looked worried. But Karoline did not mind. She had made it clear that things would not stay the same. The Hotel Leavitt Resorts was going to change, and this time it would be for the better. She sat back in her chair, feeling a small sense of victory. The road ahead would be hard, but she was ready. It was time to bring back honesty and kindness to the hotel. She had just taken the first step in making something truly great again. After Karoline's strong speech, people in the hotel were still thinking about it. The managers left the meeting with a new goal, but there was also some fear. Karoline knew that the next few steps were very important. If she wanted real change, she had to act fast. The first thing she had to do was start the training she had promised. She began calling different companies that help businesses become better. She needed the best one. She did not want someone who would just give boring lessons. She needed someone who understood why kindness and respect mattered. She wanted every worker in the hotel to know that these were not just new rules, they were the right way to be. Everyone, from the managers to the cleaning staff, had to understand that treating people well was the key to success. By the end of the day, Karoline had found the right company. The trainers would come in 1 week. They would teach workers how to talk to guests, how to solve problems, and why kindness was important in customer service. But Karoline knew training alone was not enough. If she really wanted change, it had to start with the leaders. She had to set the right example. The next few days were busy. Karoline had meeting after meeting. She wrote new rules for the hotel. The new rules made it clear that everyone, no matter what job they had to be professional and kind. If someone broke the rules, there would be consequences. She also created a way for workers and guests to share their thoughts. They could report problems or say good things about their coworkers. They could do this without saying their names, so they would not be afraid of getting in trouble. One evening, after a long day, Karoline sat in her office. She looked out the window at the hotel grounds. The sun was setting. The pool and the casino shone under the golden light. It was beautiful. But today the view felt different. She felt the weight of her responsibilities. She was not just the boss anymore, she was a leader with a mission. If she failed, her own reputation and the future of Leavitt Resorts would be at risk. Suddenly her phone buzzed. She picked it up. It was a message from Monica, the head of human resources. Monica had been collecting feedback from the workers since the problem with the receptionist happened. She had written a report and Karoline had been waiting to read it. Karoline opened the message and started reading. The results were mixed. Some workers were excited about the changes. They wanted to be part of making the hotel better. But others were not sure. Some even thought Karoline was making too big a deal out of things. They said the hotel was not as bad as she believed. But the worst part of the report was this. Some workers said they did not trust the hotel's leaders. They had seen favoritism. They felt that some rules were not fair. And they thought the managers did not always know what they were doing. Karoline sighed and leaned back in her chair. She had known this would be hard. But this report reminded her that the problems were deep. It was not just a few workers who had lost trust. It was the entire hotel. Years of bad leadership had hurt the company. She took a deep breath and started typing a reply to Monica. She thanked her for the report and asked her to set up a meeting with all the workers. Karoline knew she had to talk to them openly. If she wanted to fix this, she had to listen to them and show them that she meant what she said. Words were not enough. She had to take action. The next day, Karoline stood in front of a large group of workers. The conference room was packed. People from all departments were there: cleaners, front desk workers, security guards, and managers. The air in the room felt heavy. Some people looked curious. Others looked skeptical. Some looked worried. Karoline knew this was an important moment. How she handled this meeting would decide if her plan would work or fail. "Good morning, everyone," she began. Her voice was calm but strong. "Thank you for coming. I know there has been a lot of talk about the changes I am making. I wanted to meet with you all to explain why we are doing this and to hear what you think." She paused for a moment, letting them take in her words. "I know some of you might think these changes are not needed. Some of you might feel that things are happening too fast. And that is okay. Change is hard, especially when it comes from the top." She looked around the room. Some people nodded. Others crossed their arms. "But I want you all to know something," she continued. "I am doing this because I care about this hotel. And I care about all of you. This is not just about making more money or getting better reviews. This is about making this a place where everyone, workers and guests, feels respected." The room was silent. Everyone was listening now. "I know that trust has been broken," she said. "I know that many of you do not believe in the leadership team. I have heard the complaints about unfair treatment, bad management, and problems being ignored. I will not pretend that those things did not happen." She took a deep breath before continuing. "But I am here today to tell you this. I am going to fix it. And I need your help. We cannot change things if we do not work together. If you have concerns, I want to hear them. If you have ideas, I want to know. This is not just my hotel. It is our hotel." For a moment, no one spoke. Then a worker raised their hand. "How do we know this isn't just talk?" they asked. Karoline nodded. "That is a fair question," she said. "I will not ask you to trust me right away. But I promise you this, you will see the changes with your own eyes." The meeting was only the beginning, but Karoline could feel it. Something was shifting. Change was coming. And this time it was real. Karoline took a deep breath before she started talking. She looked at all the workers sitting in front of her. She knew this was important. "I heard what you all have been saying," she said, "and I want to talk about it. Yes, there have been problems. Big problems. Some people were not treated with respect. Some managers were unfair. Some workers got special treatment while others didn't. This is wrong and it won't happen anymore." She looked around the room. Some people nodded, showing they agreed. Others looked unsure. But Karoline wasn't going to stop. "That's why we are making changes," she continued. "We have new rules. We will have new training. We are building a new way of working together. A way that is built on kindness, fairness, and respect." She could feel that the room was changing. People were starting to listen. "I'm not saying everything will be perfect right away," she admitted. "That's not possible. But I promise one thing, I will be the first to follow these new rules. If I make a mistake, I will take responsibility. And I expect all of you to do the same." The room was quiet for a moment. Then a woman who worked in housekeeping raised her hand. Karoline smiled and nodded at her. "Yes, go ahead," Karoline said. The woman looked nervous but spoke anyway. "What do we do if we see something wrong? If someone is being treated unfairly? Or if we speak up but no one listens to us?" Karoline felt proud of the woman for asking this. This was exactly the kind of conversation she wanted to have. "That is a great question," she said. "I want every single one of you to know that your voice matters. If you see something bad happening, you can report it without fear. We have a special system where you can tell us your concerns anonymously. That means you don't have to give your name. You can also come to me directly. I promise that no one will be punished for speaking up. We will not allow bad behavior here. People in the room murmured in agreement. Karoline could see that they were starting to believe her. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but at least she had made a start. As the meeting ended, workers began to leave the room. Karoline felt a little hopeful. She knew it would take time to earn everyone's trust, but she was ready for the hard work ahead. Over the next few weeks, Karoline paid close attention to what was happening at the resort. She wanted to make sure that the changes she promised were really happening. Some workers seemed happier. They liked the new rules. They liked that everyone was being treated fairly. But not everyone felt the same way. Some workers didn't like the changes. They had worked a certain way for a long time and they didn't want to change. Karoline knew that making things better would take time. She had fired one worker, a receptionist who had been rude to guests. But she knew that firing one person wasn't enough to fix everything. She had to keep working hard to make the resort a better place. One afternoon, Karoline was walking through the lobby. She passed by the concierge desk where two employees were talking. They didn't see her, so they kept talking. She slowed down and listened carefully. "She really thinks she can change everything just like that?" one worker said. His voice sounded annoyed. "I don't think this respect thing is going to last," the other worker said. "People don't just change because someone tells them to." "Yeah," the first worker replied. "But I heard she's serious about this. I don't want to lose my job over some small mistake." Karoline kept walking, pretending she hadn't heard them. But inside, her mind was racing. She had expected this. She knew some workers felt uncomfortable with the changes. They didn't see the new rules as a way to make things better. They saw them as a way for Karoline to have control. She understood their feelings. But she wasn't going to stop. She walked faster toward her office. She had meetings to go to. She needed to make sure that everyone, managers and workers, understood that these changes were here to stay. But the words of those workers stuck in her mind. That evening, as the sun began to set, Karoline sat at her desk. She looked at a report that had come in that morning. It showed how the resort was doing since the new rules started. The good news was that guests were happier. People who visited the resort gave better reviews. But there were still problems. Some workers were still rude to guests. Some were slow in their work. Some didn't seem to care. Karoline knew she had to do something about this. Later that night, she gathered all the senior managers for a meeting. They sat around a big table waiting for her to speak. "I've been hearing some things that worry me," she said. "Some workers don't believe that these changes are real. They think this is just a temporary thing. They think we will go back to the old ways soon." The room was silent. "We have given them new training," she continued. "We have told them what we expect. But something is missing." She looked at each manager in the room. "What we are missing," she said, "is follow-through. If we don't make sure that people are following the new rules, then nothing will really change." She took a deep breath. "We can't let workers be rude to guests. We can't let them treat each other badly. We have made it clear that we won't allow this. Now, I need to know, who is still not following the rules?" The managers looked at each other. They knew she was serious. Finally, the director of operations spoke up. The meeting lasted a long time. They talked about the workers who were still not listening. They talked about how to make sure everyone followed the new rules. Karoline knew it wouldn't be easy. Some workers would leave because they didn't like the changes. But she also knew that in the end, this would make the resort a better place. In the weeks that followed, Karoline continued to check on things. She walked around the resort every day talking to workers and guests. She made sure people knew she was serious. And slowly things began to change. More and more workers started to follow the new rules. They saw that the resort was becoming a better place to work. Guests were happier. The resort was doing better. Some workers still didn't like the changes. But they knew that if they didn't change, they might not be able to stay. Karoline wasn't going to stop. She was in this for the long run. She had promised to make things better. And she was going to keep that promise, no matter how hard it was. Natalie looked at Karoline and said, "I've talked to some of the managers. Some employees don't like the changes we're making. They think you are just trying to be the boss of everything. They don't think this is about making the resort better. They think you are taking away their freedom." Karoline leaned forward, her eyes serious. "And what did you do about it?" Natalie was quiet for a moment before answering. "We tried talking to them, but they didn't want to listen. Some of them think they can do whatever they want just because they have worked here for a long time. They believe they know best and don't want to change." Karoline pressed her lips together. She had expected this, but hearing it out loud still made her upset. The problem was not just with the workers. Even some of the higher-up staff felt like they could do whatever they wanted. "We cannot let this continue," Karoline said firmly. This resort is not a place for big egos. No one is more important than the culture we are building. If they refuse to change, they can leave. I'm not here to be popular. I am here to make this resort better. If they don't like that, they can find another job." The room went silent. Everyone understood how serious Karoline was. This decision wouldn't be popular, but it was necessary. The resort had let bad behavior go on for too long. Now it had to stop. "I want a report on which employees are still refusing to follow our values," Karoline said. "I want it by the end of the week. We will start with the most stubborn ones and go from there. If they don't want to change, they are out. We will replace them with people who believe in what we are trying to do." Some people in the room looked nervous, but they nodded. Karoline didn't care if they were uncomfortable. She knew this was the right thing to do. She had worked too hard to let the resort be ruined by a few people who didn't want to change. As the meeting ended, Karoline thought about the staff members who were refusing to accept the new way of doing things. She wasn't trying to be mean, but this had to be done. For too long, people had been allowed to act however they wanted, and now it was hurting the resort. But she was ready to fix it no matter how hard it was. Months had passed since Karoline had become CEO. At first, the changes she made were difficult for many people. Some of them didn't like it. But as time passed, things started to get better. Karoline walked through the bright, beautiful lobby of the resort. The air felt different. The changes she had made were no longer just ideas. They were actually happening. She knew that real change didn't happen overnight. It wasn't about making big speeches or forcing people to act a certain way. It was about creating a place where respect was normal, not optional. Where professionalism was expected, not just a rule written on paper. It had been hard work. Many people had fought against the changes. But now she could see it was working. Staff members were paying more attention. Guests were happier. Even the employees who had been the most against the new rules were starting to see why they were important. At the end of the day, Karoline finished a long meeting with her senior managers. They had talked about guest satisfaction, which had improved a lot in the past few months. The new training programs were working. Employees were talking to each other more, and problems were being solved faster. But Karoline wasn't going to relax just yet. She knew there was still a lot to do. The resort was moving in the right direction, but some employees still didn't want to change. She couldn't ignore that. She walked into the executive meeting room. Her team was sitting around a big table, talking. When she entered, the room became quiet. Karoline smiled a little. This was different from before. Months ago, when she first became CEO, people had been scared of her. They didn't know what to think. But now they respected her. Not because she was the boss, but because they saw that she was serious about making things better. "I know you've all been working very hard," Karoline said, "and I want to thank you for that. But we are not done yet." Her team nodded. They understood that she wasn't going to slow down. From the very start, she had told them that this was serious. There was no place for people who didn't want to be part of the change. Some employees had already been let go because they refused to follow the new way of doing things. It had been difficult but necessary. Now it was time for the next step. "We have made progress," Karoline said, "but now we need to focus on our guests. We've fixed problems inside the resort, but now we need to make sure our guests can feel the difference." One of the managers, Daniel, spoke up. He was in charge of guest relations. "We've gotten some really good feedback from guests. They like better service, but there are still some complaints. Some guests say they have to wait too long for things. Others say their experience is not always the same. What should we do next?" Karoline nodded. "We need to work on making things run more smoothly," she said, "especially in busy areas like check-in and the concierge desk. Every guest should have a great experience from the moment they walk in until the moment they leave. That means making sure our employees know exactly what to do to keep things moving quickly and smoothly." Daniel wrote down notes. "Got it. I'll talk to the operations team about this." "Good," Karoline said. "I also want us to focus on making things more personal. Right now we are professional and polite, but we need to do more. We need to make guests feel special. Not just like customers, but like they are part of something great." Her team looked excited. They were ready to work on this next step. Karoline knew that small details mattered the most. People didn't just want luxury. They wanted to feel welcome, to feel like they were part of something special. As the meeting ended, Karoline stood up. She could feel the energy in the room. Her team was no longer just following orders. They believed in the changes. They wanted to help make the resort better. The next day, Karoline decided to walk around the resort. She wanted to see if all the changes were really making a difference. As she walked through the lobby, she noticed something different. The front desk employees, who used to be cold and uninterested, now smiled warmly at guests. The bellhops were more helpful. The concierge desk was busy with employees happily helping guests. Even the bar was filled with laughter. It was nothing like before. Months ago, the resort had felt dull and unfriendly. But now it was full of life. Karoline walked into the casino. The guests were happy, chatting with each other while playing games. The employees looked more engaged. They were paying attention to the guests, making sure they were having a good time. She smiled to herself. The hard work was paying off. But she knew this was just the beginning. As she walked, a guest approached her. It was a woman who had been at the big gala months ago when Karoline had become CEO. "I don't know if you remember me," the woman said, "but I was at the gala. You gave a wonderful speech that night. I just wanted to say, I've noticed the changes. The staff is so much friendlier now. The service is amazing. You've really made a difference." Karoline felt proud. This was why she had worked so hard. It wasn't just about running a business. It was about making sure every guest felt special. She smiled at the woman. "Thank you," she said warmly. "We are always working to improve. It means a lot to hear that you can see the difference." And she meant it, because this was just the beginning of something great. As the woman walked away, Karoline stood still for a moment, feeling happy inside. She had always known that being successful wasn't just about winning awards or making rules. The real success came from the people, the workers and the guests. Now she could see the future of Leavitt Resort clearly. It wasn't just about being big and fancy. It was about how people felt when they were there. That was what mattered most, and that was what she would fight for. As Karoline left the casino and walked toward her office, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her operations manager, Natalie. The title of the message was simple: Employee Progress Report. Karoline opened it quickly. As she read the numbers, she smiled. Things were getting better. Fewer workers were quitting their jobs, guests were happier than ever, and even the people who didn't believe in her ideas at first were now starting to accept the new changes. She nodded to herself as she read the report. It was good news, but she wasn't going to stop working hard. She knew that changing a place like Leavitt Resort wouldn't happen in just a few months. It would take years to make sure everything was exactly how she wanted. But for the first time in a long time, she felt sure about the future. People no longer saw her return as a surprise. Now they understood it was the beginning of something new. She was leading the resort toward a better future, one that was built on respect, kindness, and excellence. That night, as she sat in her office, she looked out at the resort's beautiful gardens. Just a few months ago, the place had been struggling. People weren't happy. Workers didn't feel important. But things were changing now. Leavitt Resort wasn't just a fancy place anymore. It was becoming a home for everyone who worked there and everyone who visited. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was from Monica, the head of human resources. The message title caught her attention: Staff Feedback, Positive Trends and Concerns. Karoline opened it eagerly. Monica had been working hard to collect honest opinions from the employees. The results were mixed, but overall they were good. Workers were happier than before. They said they felt like they belonged. There was more teamwork and people were working harder because they cared. Complaints about bad leadership had gone down. Instead of complaints, there were thank you messages. Workers appreciated the honesty and fairness that Karoline had brought to the resort. But not everything was perfect. Some workers were unsure about the new systems. They weren't used to the new rules and needed more time to learn. Others felt tired because there were so many changes happening at once. Karoline understood. Change was hard even when it was for the best. But one thing in the message stood out to her. The workers wanted to see her more often. They didn't just want a boss who sat in a fancy office all day. They wanted a leader, someone who would be there with them, walking beside them, not just giving orders from far away. Karoline smiled. This was exactly what she had hoped for. Her hands-on approach was working. People wanted a leader who cared, who listened, who was present. And she was happy to be that leader. She put her phone down and leaned back in her chair. She knew that to truly make Leavitt Resort successful, she had to keep moving forward. She had to dream bigger. The next morning, Karoline walked through the busy hallways of the resort. She watched as guests laughed and chatted. She saw workers greeting people with warm smiles. As she walked, she stopped to talk to different employees. This was something she did every day now. A young housekeeper approached her with a bright smile. "Miss Leavitt, I just wanted to say thank you for the new training. I understand my job better now and I feel like I really belong here," she said. Karoline's heart filled with pride. She smiled. "I'm so happy to hear that. Your job is just as important as anyone else's. You make this place special," Karoline said kindly. As she continued walking, she made mental notes of everything around her. The small changes were making a big difference. The staff seemed happier. The service was more polished. There was more energy in the air. She was reminded once again, true leadership wasn't about rules or numbers. It was about people. She had always wanted Leavitt Resort to be more than just a place to stay. She wanted it to be a place where everyone felt valued, workers and guests alike. Now she could see it happening. In the following weeks, Karoline started thinking about the big picture. Leavitt Resort was doing well, but what about its future? She wanted Leavitt Resort to be more than just one resort in one city. She had an idea. What if Leavitt Resort became a brand? Not just in Las Vegas but all over the world. The hotel industry was tough. There were always new places trying to be better, fancier, and more exciting. Karoline knew that if she wanted Leavitt Resort to last forever, she had to think about more than just today. She wanted people to think of Leavitt Resort as the best place to go when they wanted a luxurious and personalized experience. She imagined partnering with top travel companies so people around the world would hear about the resort. Creating a strong online presence where influencers and bloggers could share their experiences. Building sister resorts in other cities, each one carrying the same values of Leavitt Resort. The first step was rebranding. Karoline met with the marketing team. She also hired some of the best branding experts she could find. We need to show people that this resort isn't just about being fancy, she told her team. It's about how people feel when they stay here. People don't just want a nice hotel. They want to feel special. We need to make that part of our story. The team listened carefully, writing down ideas. Karoline's passion was contagious. Over the next few months, the changes started taking shape. A new marketing campaign launched and people loved it. The resort became popular on social media. Travel influencers started sharing their experiences, talking about the amazing service and beautiful amenities. There was even talk of special retreats, relaxing experiences designed for guests who wanted to feel pampered and taken care of. Meanwhile, Karoline never stopped being hands-on. She still walked through the resort. She still talked to the staff. She still led by example. She knew that the true secret to success wasn't just about looking fancy. It was about creating a place where people felt at home. One night, as she was preparing for an important call with business partners, Karoline looked out her office window. The city lights sparkled below, and the resort glowed softly in the night. She thought about everything she had been through. The doubts, the struggles, the resistance from people who didn't believe in her vision. But now, Leavitt Resort was thriving. People were noticing. Karoline smiled. This was only the beginning. She was just getting started. If you enjoyed this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more exciting stories filled with adventure, mystery, and unforgettable moments. Your support means the world. It keeps these stories coming and the creativity flowing. Thanks for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.